Have you ever wondered, as an investor, which is a better bet, NVIDIA or AMD? In the world of tech investment, these two names are juggernauts. On one side, we have NVIDIA, a leader in the realm of graphics processing units and AI technologies. On the other, there's AMD, a major player in microprocessors, motherboards, and graphic processors. Today we're going to compare these two powerhouses, looking at their financial performance and what that might mean for potential investors. Let's dive into the financial performance of these two tech giants. First off, let's talk revenues. When we look at the last 3 quarters of 2023, we find that NVIDIA boasted total revenues of $39 billion, while AMD generated $17 billion. Now these are impressive numbers, but what's more intriguing is how these figures have evolved over time. Over the last 5 years, NVIDIA has experienced a compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of 33% in its revenues, while AMD has seen a growth rate of 26%. Now it's not just about how much revenue a company generates, but also where it's coming from. NVIDIA's revenue structure shows that 75% of its income comes from its data center, 20% from gaming, and the remaining 5% from other sources. On the other hand, AMD's revenue is more evenly distributed, with 26% each coming from its data center and embedded sectors, 29% from gaming, and the remaining 19% from client services. The geographical distribution of revenue is another interesting aspect to consider. For NVIDIA, 38% of its revenue comes from the United States, 23% from Taiwan, 22% from China, 12% from Singapore, and the remaining 6% from other regions. AMD, on the other hand, earns 33% of its revenue from the United States, 22% from China, 18% from Japan, 10% from Taiwan, and the remaining 17% from other areas. As we can see, both companies have their strengths when it comes to revenue generation. NVIDIA has a substantial share of its revenue coming from the rapidly growing data center sector, while AMD has a more diversified revenue structure. Moreover, while NVIDIA has a wider global footprint, AMD has a strong presence in Japan, a market that NVIDIA has yet to penetrate significantly. These are fascinating dynamics that will continue to shape the future performance of these two technology giants. Now, let's shift our focus to profits. Over the past 3 quarters of 2023, NVIDIA has seen a gross profit margin of 71%, a considerable increase from their 5-year average of 63%. AMD, on the other hand, has maintained a steady gross profit margin of 45%, just above their 5-year average of 44%. But the real story unfolds when we delve into the net profit margins. NVIDIA has a remarkable net profit margin of 45%, a significant leap from their 5-year average of 30%. This is largely due to the global surge in AI technology, which has served NVIDIA well in the year 2023. In contrast, AMD's net profit margin stands at a meager 1%, a decrease from their 5-year average of 8%. The net profit for the past 3 quarters of 2023 paints an even more stark picture. NVIDIA reported a net profit of $17.5 billion, while AMD managed just $187 million. This represents a compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of 37% for NVIDIA over the last 5 years. AMD, however, has seen a CAGR of -8% in the same time frame. In the race of 2023, NVIDIA has clearly taken the lead, while AMD has struggled with a significant decline in net profit. NVIDIA's superior performance is a testament to their effective use of assets to generate substantial profits. With a total asset base smaller than that of AMD, NVIDIA has managed to generate larger profits, indicating an efficient use of assets. When it comes to liquidity, both companies have shown excellent performance. NVIDIA boasts a current ratio of 3.59 and a quick ratio of 3.06. AMD trails slightly with a current ratio of 2.19 and a quick ratio of 1.61. Despite the lead, both companies demonstrate robust liquidity, with NVIDIA showing a stronger position. Clearly, NVIDIA has an edge when it comes to profitability. Let's now take a look at how these companies manage their assets. When we peek into NVIDIA's and AMD's financial books, we see a distinct difference in their total assets for the 3rd quarter of 2023. NVIDIA has a total of $54 billion in assets, while AMD surpasses that with $68 billion. However, the net assets tell a different story. NVIDIA has $33 billion, while AMD has a higher $55 billion. Now this isn't just a numbers game, it's about how effectively these companies use their assets to generate profits. let's talk ratios. The equity to total assets ratio for NVIDIA is 61%, whereas for AMD it's 81%. This ratio indicates the proportion of a company's assets that are financed by stockholders, not creditors. A higher ratio is generally preferred as it indicates less financial risk. Yet, even with a smaller ratio, NVIDIA is generating greater profits. This suggests that NVIDIA is more efficient in leveraging its assets to yield profits. To sum it up, while AMD holds more assets, NVIDIA seems to be more efficient in using its assets to generate profits. This is an important consideration for investors, as efficient asset management can be a strong indicator of a company's financial health and operational efficiency. NVIDIA seems to be more efficient in using its assets to generate profits. Next, let's discuss operational efficiency and cash flow. It's important to understand these metrics as they provide insight into how well a company manages its resources and liquidity. First, we'll look at inventory days. This is the average number of days that items remain in inventory before they're sold. For NVIDIA, that number is 119 days. AMD, on the other hand, has an average of 124 days. It's a close call, but NVIDIA appears to have a slightly better handle on inventory management. Next, we have accounts receivable days. This is the average number of days it takes a company to collect payment after a sale has been made. NVIDIA's average is 42 days, while AMD's is significantly higher at 75 days. In this case, NVIDIA clearly has the upper hand, collecting payments more quickly than AMD. Now let's talk about cash flow, specifically operating cash flow and free cash flow. Operating cash flow, or OCF, is the cash generated from regular business operations. In the first 3 quarters of 2023, NVIDIA's OCF was $16.6 billion, dwarfing AMD's at $1.3 billion. Free cash flow, or FCF, is the cash a company has left over after it pays for its operating expenses and capital expenditures. NVIDIA's FCF was $15.8 billion again, significantly higher than AMD's $1.3 billion. Finally, we have the OCF to net income ratio. This ratio compares a company's operating cash flow to its net income, giving us a sense of how effectively a company is converting its profits into cash. NVIDIA's OCF to net income ratio was 0.9, while AMD's was 6.9. In conclusion, while both companies show excellent liquidity, NVIDIA seems to have a better cash flow management. It's important to keep these factors in mind when considering an investment in either of these tech giants. Finally, let's take a look at the ROE of these companies through a DuPont analysis. The ROE, or return on equity, is a measure of financial performance calculated by dividing net income by shareholders' equity. It's considered an important metric in comparing the profitability of companies within the same sector. Now, for the third quarter of 2023, NVIDIA's ROE was a whopping 70%. This was largely due to its impressive net profit margin of 45%. On the other hand, AMD's ROE was a mere 0.5%, with a net profit margin of just 1%. The asset turnover, which measures a company's efficiency in using its assets to generate sales, was also higher for NVIDIA, standing at 1.09 compared to AMD's 0.33. Finally, the asset-to-equity ratio, which indicates the proportion of the company's assets financed by stockholders' equity, was 1.63 for NVIDIA and 1.23 for AMD. NVIDIA's high ROE is mainly due to its large net profit margin. So, NVIDIA or AMD? To summarize, NVIDIA has shown impressive growth, with stronger profit margins and better asset management. They've capitalized on the AI boom, making significant profits with fewer assets. AMD, however, has shown resilience, with a diverse revenue structure and a higher net asset value. In conclusion, while both companies have their strengths, NVIDIA seems to have an edge in many areas. However, the final decision should be based on your investment goals and risk tolerance.